and that should let you raise your hand, put the question in there, and hopefully I'll get to. I got a couple polling questions in here too, just get general sort of info. Nothing user specific. It's just general question, just to kind of gauge the temperature in the room, I suppose. So we got a couple polls. Then we'll talk about the software, do a little quick demo of our software, and talk about network documentation and so on. Again, if you have questions, we'll answer those probably at the end. So not a lot of slides here. It's more live software. So polling question. You have to apologize because I'm not. Oh, here we go. Polls. Launch poll. How do you document your network today? Let me launch this. Visio, spreadsheets, sort of a bunch of stuff, or no, nothing really. No documentation. Spreadsheets, yeah, it's always kind of a good one. So let's see what else. Hodgepodge Visio. Visio is sort of one of the Visio and spreadsheets are sort of the de facto standards. Nothing wrong with those. Visio is a pretty good tool, except when you have really large networks, it gets kind of hard to document stuff in that. Spreadsheets too, especially if you do an outside plant and you have lots of assets, lots of fiber and that sort of thing, it's a little tough. And then of course a collection, that's always hard to manage too. It looks like everybody's got some documentation though. So 10 more seconds here. See if anybody else wants to chime in. Spreadsheet seems to be the winner though. And that's a minute. So we'll end that poll. And I guess I can move on. So making documentation easy or easier, that's sort of the premise of this. You know, how do you make it easier? One is you don't do it at all. That's a pretty easy method. That's got downsides and risks to it. Downside being, well, you don't have documentation, so might make it harder for you to troubleshoot your network, find information and data. If you have, audits and other things, might be hard to sort of show people or tell people how things are connected together, and so on. So it's not always a great thing to not do documentation. So how do we make it easier? Well, use software, Visio, spreadsheets, or other tools. We would fall in the category of other tools. But the problem that we find is over time, and I'm sure you guys have too, is over time it's hard to manage some of those tools. They're not really automated, or they're not really sort of geared towards network documentation. Well, the one good thing about them, at least spreadsheets, most people know how to use a spreadsheet. You know, it's something you learn in school and have with you throughout your life. Visio to a certain extent, but you certainly to really get powerful in Visio, there's a little bit of a learning curve. Not that there's not in other software too. So they're they're perfectly good tools if they fit what you're trying to do. But if they don't, your network gets bigger. You're trying to do more automation. You're trying to get data from other data systems, and so on. It gets a little harder. And we do documentations for different reasons. Troubleshooting is a big one. It might be, again, things like audits, reducing risk, helping with security, where documentation isn't necessarily going to stop a security breach, but it might help you understand how things are connected and maybe better secure your network. So those types of things. Let's see what else. Polling question number 2. Let me move to number 2 here and launch it. How much time do you think you would save with good documentation? That can be hard to say, but maybe generally you might say, oh, not much, or wow, a ton. If you're on the not much side, then there's probably no reason to change what you're doing as far as your documentation goes, or maybe not even invest in it. And on the other spectrum, if it saves you tons of time, then of course it's something you want to investigate, and then it becomes a question of what's the right tool, and so on. So that's kind of what it comes down to. So I'd say save a good amount of time seems to be the winner. Actually, it's a tie with a fair amount of time. I'll give this another 10 seconds. Then we'll move forward. And moving forward, polling so we can move forward. It's usually when I talk to folks about documentation and what they're trying to do, always ask, what are you doing today? And if you're not going to save more time, get benefit, obviously get some sort of ROI, then certainly you don't really want to change it. I tell you not to change it myself. But if you feel like you're going to, or there's some very specific, compelling reasons why you need it, then of course you want to go down that path. Let me end polling here and close that and come over here. So what do you need to do to make things a little bit easier on you from a documentation standpoint? Discovery is always a nice thing. There's various discovery tools out there. We typically talk in terms of discovery being something like, or most people would think, SNMP type discovery, right? You go out, put in your IP address ranges, and do a discovery, which is great. And that's how we do from an SNMP standpoint. But there's other ways we can get data into our system as well. That's really the third-party data there on the second line, easily connect to third-party data. Anymore, using third parties like APIs, right? We also have the ability to connect to back-end databases and tables and views and that sort of thing. And that's all well and good. Oftentimes, that's a great way to connect. But really, nowadays, APIs are kind of the way to go. That's why they exist, that programming interface, so you can pull information from another system or, control another system, et cetera. We're on the side of just getting data or information from another system to visualize it. Now, the other thing, too, what do you need to do? Physical and logical network views. Physical is hierarchy down to cables, and logical is just a high-level overview of some drawing. It's the typical network engineer diagram on a wall hanging up. Unfortunately, a lot of times those things are out of date. So that's where you get back to trying to automate, make things easier on you. Inventory can play into this, inventory and assets. What do I have? Where is it? Et cetera. That's always an important thing. Why do you want to know what you have and where it is? Well, you might have an asset management system, but from our standpoint, if you can, in our tool, we let you visualize it. Where is it? So you can find it with a search, understand exactly where it is in your network, and so on. Not knowing where a piece of equipment is can certainly take a lot more time to troubleshoot it. Hey, I got to go find it. Nobody knows where it's at. And that seems to happen more often than you might think. Piece of equipment is out there, it's reachable, it's doing a job, but nobody really physically knows where it is. You check the SNMP location information, and that was put in there, before it got moved 20 times, right? So it's nice to be able to put the information into a place and visually see kind of where it is. Track and manage cables and circuits, that's always a big thing, mapping VMs and so on. But I want to talk about discovery on the top end of this and maybe a little third-party stuff too. So that's where the NetTrain in action comes into play. So let me get out a PowerPoint. If you want to, again, sales or fred.co at Graphical Networks, there's our phone number. You can go to our website, graphicalnetworks.com. NetTrain is the software. So, all right, let me close PowerPoint. I know, it's sad. You probably want more slides, I'm sure. So documentation, just as a quick example, you might have something where you have an object with data fields, and you sort of drill your way down into some sort of hierarchy of information. I got buildings, I've got maps, I've got floors, I have rooms, I have assets, I've got racks, power, all kinds of equipment. I want to see that maybe in the physical hierarchy, right? Showing power connections, and all the way down to what's the device and the ports and how things are physically connected and so on. So, and then the other side of that would be, again, more the logical topology, where you have more of a logical layout of equipment, showing sort of high-level overview of how things are connected together. we can tie physical and logical together, so when you look at a device in a logical drawing, you can see it back in the physical. But how do you get to the point where you're doing this kind of thing, where you're seeing this data in a system, and especially if you don't have data already or it's not necessarily trustworthy, maybe you're new to a network and you just want to find out what you have out there and so on, what do you do? Or you have systems with data, but you'd like to maybe better visualize that information and data, not just see tables and views and that kind of thing through a web form, right? So one of the things we offer in NetTerrain is our collector. And this has various connectors in it, AWS, Azure, SNMP, and so on. I'm going to focus on SNMP right now. And this has, of course, the ability to go in and you set up IP address range or ranges, and you put in your community strings and so on, and press a button and go out and do a scan. The nice thing about this, what we call the collector, is you can run it where the server is, you can run it from your laptop, you can run it in different environments and have it do its collection. And then from there, it can gather the data like it's doing here, doing a discovery. It's just a small bunch of devices in a lab, and you'll see those in a minute. But you can see it walks through and does its sort of polling of data and information. And once it does its task, you can click on and see the connections it found or the devices it found. These ones are in different segments of the network. And after that, the data is here, but of course you want to visualize the data, so then you push it to our NetTerrain instance or server. So this is one way you go out, and I'll sort of do a little push data here. And I'm pushing it to an instance I have out on the web in our cloud instance. I just signed up for it and, pushing data to it through the collector. So you can see it's got the top level network object, and then you'll see some of these objects here in just a minute as it finishes its push of data here. And you'll notice we're collecting sort of standard OIDs, IP, range, description, and so on over here. You could collect more stuff too. I'll talk about that in a minute as well. So it finished its push of data. So I can come back here and double click and go and see kind of what it did. It's going to try and lay out the drawing to a certain extent if there's connections in it. That's basically what it's doing here. Just kind of flatline them across though. So I can come down here. What are these different things? These are just the different networks we discovered. I can turn those back on if I want to and see the names and so on. And those, again, correlate to what I put in as far as my ranges go. This one was like the south or whatever. I could put a map in if I want to have it sort of show it maybe where these are geographically, these different networks. This is our integration with OpenStreetMaps. So I could place the networks where they belong and sort of visually see it. I could also upload a background image like a PNG or something. That's just, again, just kind of showing you sort of what it is. But if we look at this network, 2021, 21.1, I guess. If I double click on that, then we'll start to see the actual devices that it discovered. Again, it's doing its little sort of layout thing. So, which is nice that it spreads things out for you automatically, so it kind of gives you a starting point. Of course, you're going to move things around probably more and clean things up a bit, which is fine. In this case, it did a pretty good job. I have one object that's not technically connected, but it was discovered in the range, which is fine. So it's, switch, it's got some linkages to some of the different devices. If you look at a device on the left-hand side, you'll see information about the device. So details about the devices. Again, the standard kind of OID information. So it goes out and it tries to, build those connections, what's connected to what, gives you information in the link about what the connection is from device to device. That's the ID that it created for the devices from port to port, etc. And it kind of depends on the data set and kind of what you end up with. It's fully populated or not. That kind of depends on the device and where the data is coming from. But the point is, you're trying to get to this point where hopefully this will give you a large chunk of your network as far as how things are connected together. It's not a true physical connection, right? I mean, because you're not talking about, yeah, maybe there is actually a cable from this switch to this device, but also there might be patch panels in between. So those you might have to insert, because if you don't have smart patch panels, it's not going to discover those. That's just sort of normal stuff. But again, you sort of get back to the point where you're able to go out, run a discovery, and start to find information. Now, what I can do is after I've done this discovery, I can take those objects that were discovered and start to place them in these different locations. Literally pick up a device, cut it, paste it, move it, that kind of thing. So it's helping me go out and find the stuff, the devices, routers, switches, whatever it is, servers, and then I can move it. Now, we can move things automatically, too, if you're populating information about the device, sort of its location, where it is, right? So if I'm picking up the location field, which in this case I'm not, you could, if the location's correct, you could have it mapped to a particular rack if it's unique also. That kind of thing. So you can get more granular in what you do, but I want to go and do a discovery and find information about my network. This is a pretty good way to go. Setting up those ranges, SNMP, and so on. Obviously, if you don't know your SNMP, community strings, and other things, you might have to just go with public for starters until you can figure out what they are. But you may have other options, too, and that's where we get into these other connectors. So if you are doing something like SolarWinds, you have vCenter, INSX, and so on, Nmap, it's another great way to kind of go out and see what might be out there. You can gather, those tools will gather data as well if you put in the information for those systems that you have, and it will collect that data, and that will also get pushed into NetTerrain, and then you can use that data as part of your documentation. I mean, the whole, the thing that you ultimately want, of course, is push a button, and documentation happens, and then you set up a schedule where it's just constantly updating the information. And hopefully you're having minimal amount of time that you're spending on the documentation. That always goes also back to what you're trying to do. You don't want to do more than you really want to, need to, have to, at a documentation standpoint. I have customers that document everything all the way down to every port in the rack and power and data, and that's what they do because it's in their business line. It's very important, critical. And I have others that are more logical or just high level. I just need core routers and switches. That's all they really care about, and the rest of it is they don't really need to document in that particular model. And that's fine. So it's a good kind of thing to go and find what it is you really need, what makes the most sense for what you're doing, and don't go past that. Don't add more functionality just because you have it. There's no reason to, because one, it costs time, and of course that costs money, but also you might be more licenses for something like a tool like ours. So you want to try and minimize the amount you spend there. So anyway, that's all I wanted to really talk and show today. Just talk about sort of how you can automate and also use other systems to bring data in. If you want to try things out or whatever, we can help you out with kind of signing up and checking things out. Or if you have questions, just let us know. But I'll stop this share, and I'm just going to see if there's any questions out there. Give me a second because I got to find the actual where the questions are. Let me see here. No. More. Okay. I don't see the button where questions are located. So, oh, here it is, Q&A. There we go. So nothing yet, but I'm going to give you guys a minute to maybe come up with a couple. Otherwise, we'll call it a day, call it a webinar, and again, if you guys have more questions, of course, you can always reach out, which is fine as well. Our website's got a lot of information, graphicalnetworks.com, about different, there's some videos and stuff. Some of the videos are a little dated, truthfully. But there's some good information, and we can always get you out there in our trial server if you want to try things out. It's no problem. So, is there a connector to a InfoBlox server? Currently, no. I've had a few people kind of ask about that. I think we did a little research on it for the InfoBlox, and I think they have some APIs for it. So how we usually handle that is I go back to, usually somebody asks me about it, I go to engineering and ask them, hey, look at the APIs. If they're pretty straightforward, because I have to get a little bit of information from you from the standpoint of what is it that you want to get out of InfoBlox, you know, is it the IPs and then the associated device, or what exactly are you looking for? And if it's pretty straightforward, usually those connectors will just build and add into our collector. So if it's more complicated, then sometimes that requires service time. So if you're purchasing the software, then we talk to you about that, if there's extra charge or not. But nowadays with APIs, it's usually if they're pretty mature in their APIs, it's usually not a big deal, because ours are pretty set up kind of for the engineers now. They can just go out and just kind of add stuff for the most part. But again, we like to check first, because sometimes we run into some strange systems and they've got some really badly documented APIs, so it's kind of hard to say, yeah, we'll just do it. So anyway, always happy to accommodate where we can. Learning part of the system. Live network monitoring and alerting are part of the system. Kind of depends on what you're looking for there. So we have status monitoring that will be available very soon. We have an 8.3 release coming out, and that's going to be in the 8.3 release, which is due out in about January. So that will allow you to see, you know, is the device responding anymore or not, send out alerts and that kind of thing. If you're looking for much more detailed, granular type of alerting or alarming, I think you might want to look more at like a SolarWinds for now and check that, of course, that product out. It's been around a long time. It's a great product. So you might look at that. Yeah, so Jay was asking me questions about fiber paths and that kind of thing. Yeah, you should reach out to us. Reach out to Fred, Jay, and we can certainly talk about that. Our outside fiber plant has matured quite a bit. Outside plant OSP. I didn't really talk about this here, and you know, I was trying to just stay focused on general discovery and connecting the systems and pulling data. We do have an outside plant as part of our net terrain software where you can document, you know, down to strands, cables, create associations between cables, fiber cables, and the conduits, ducts, and that type of thing. So if anybody's interested in those types of things, or DCIM, or just network documentation in general, just talk to Fred. He's a pretty easy person to get along with. You know, we're not here to try not to be typical salespeople, you know, just bugging you and bothering you and all that. We want to make sure it's the right fit, and make sure it's the right product for you, and just talk about what you need more than anything. So, yeah, no problem, Jay. So I'll give you guys another minute or two, see if there's other questions. But, yeah, thanks, everybody, certainly for attending today. And, again, just reach out. You know, there's obviously a lot of things out there you can take a look at and make sure it's the right one that fits for you and what you're trying to do. We're not always the right fit for everybody. That's you know, just how it is. That's why there's a lot of different software out there in the world. So, but all right. I don't see anything else coming in, so we'll call it a day. Thank you very much, guys, for attending. Really appreciate it, and talk at you later. Thanks.